We have a couple of more readers, 3 more readers tonight. The first writer up will be our friend from Omaha, Greg Kosmicki. I've known him for a long time. I've run into him in many places, coffee houses, bookstores, readings, seminars, etc., etc., etc. He is the guy that basically has made poetry hit the landscape with printed material and wonderfully fine covers and wonderfully done typesetting, typeface, etc. That's basically what has happened with Backwaters Press over all these years. And on top of that, somehow he has managed to find time to write a few things himself. I think he's published 7 or 8 books so far, and 2 chapbooks, along with poems in a number of magazines around the country. So without further ado, Greg Kosmicki.
Thanks, Rex. Thank you all for coming out too on this chilly March 2nd, and thanks to Mojava for allowing us to be here. And we see it's great to have to follow such a wonderful musician as Jack, and to be able to read with Steve Langan and Maria Nassos over there. So without any further bleep dab. What time is it, Rex?
It's
That's 27.
27?
6:27.
27, okay.
Okay.
6:27.
I'll read about 6 or 7 poems. Drove to the big box store mall to get some envelopes. Got out of the car to hear, high up in the sky, obstructed from sight by lights all over the vast stretches of concrete, hidden by the overcast I love, we had all day and all night. The insistent bleating, honking, crying, ancient voices of the Canada geese as they fly over this mall just a little west of the great Middle American Flyway. Wonder if they're as confused as they sound, flying in circles, bumping into each other like Laurel and Hardy. But no, I'm only projecting feelings as a modern, walking on concrete where it used to be a grassy hill 40 years ago in a city, once prairie, projecting feelings, separations from nature, separation from self, abstract concepts, real sensations. Misunderstood, so shout at the guy who cuts in front of me later, give him the finger. Your sons and daughters off to war if you're poor. The rest totally crazy and want to kill everyone who's different. But I know they know where they're heading. The geese are not lost. Because if you have one if you have one that you really read one that you really hate and then you don't clap, then I'll feel bad. So. This is a kind of longish poem called "Whenever I Peel an Orange." It's in memory of a guy I used to know where I worked. Is the mic okay? Is it okay? It's 1:30 a.m. or so, and a little while ago I ate a banana. I got up from the kitchen table and dropped the peeling into the trash can. Then ate an orange that I peeled all in a long continuous strip and dropped that in the trash can too. The orange, like all oranges, was tart and burned my dry winter lips a little when I ate it. Whenever I peel an orange that way, I think of this guy I used to know at my job who was a nice guy, but on the opposite end of the spectrum from me politically. He used to peel his oranges, then hang the skin on the wall of his cubicle. I never asked him about it, but guessed that he did that because there was always only one fresh orange peel spiral hanging from his cubicle wall. He was a guy who believed in a literal interpretation of the Bible, however it was that his preacher happened to literally interpret it. So he'd get visibly angry sometimes when we talked, and I would say stuff that I knew would piss him off, just to see him get all flustered, see his eyes narrow a bit, shoulders hunch, or sometimes he would draw back, look down his nose at me like he was examining a dangerous species of insect before he found some way to crush it. Even though he was weird that way, I always kind of liked him. Maybe because he was an old farm kid from far out in the central part of Nebraska, and I was an old farm kid from even farther west in western Nebraska. Only I maybe fell in with a weird group of people and smoked dope and dropped acid in the Navy, while he walked the straight and narrow in the Army and held on to all those homegrown values. He was a master with the copy machine. I, the kind of person makes them jam up just by walking by one. So one day I asked him how come he knew so much about copy machines. He kind of swelled up with pride, said he'd been some kind of printing technician in the Army. But there at our job, he had a hard time adjusting to changes, and our job was always changing, thanks to cuts in funding and a general overall attitude of contempt for the poor our right-wing governor had in the redneck state we lived in and worked for. I'm not mentioning any names. I was the guy's boss, so I knew the tough time he had adjusting, and I knew how he bucked the system his own way by trying to continue to use all the old ways because they were better. One time before he got sick, he told me he was having trouble with his son. He was worried about him, who kept getting towed at his apartment because he wouldn't buy a sticker or something goofy like that. I felt queasy he would confide in me about anything, especially his son, though it seemed like he was just making dumb mistakes, nothing major like meth or addictions to something else like my kid that I'd never shared with him, and I never would have. I thought his kid was being stupid, but didn't say that, and listened father to father, as though he were telling me something truly shocking. I told him, tell your kid, buy the freaking permit. And he had, but there was some excuse. That's the closest we ever got. But I could figure out, never could figure out why he talked to me about it. It was a closeness I'd never felt we either one had earned. He was diabetic and overweight, but always ate carefully, low carb. Took a walk on the lunch hour to keep his weight down. Explained to me how diabetics can't burn up carbs like normal. He always said, be careful, as a way to send you off at the end of the day. When most people would say, see you tomorrow or be good. One angry client took it wrong, and I had to defuse him. What did he mean by that? Be careful. Was that a threat? The last time I saw him, he was heading out for the weekend, had on a pair of shooter's goggles. Made me think somehow of James Dickey, though I never told him, because I would have had to explain. I talked to his wife on the phone because she called to say he'd be out for tests or for another 2 weeks, or that he'd be back, or that they've got to do more surgery, or that he wasn't coming back. He's the last guy I thought would die out of all the people I've worked with who smoked cigarettes, drank sodas, ate junk, and never exercised. On a routine visit, it was the dentist who spotted the lesion. I think of him every time I peel an orange, whether I can get that one continuous strip going or not. No matter if I'm at home or work, peeling an orange for breakfast, or like tonight, alone in the kitchen, waiting out stuff. I think of him and wonder which one of us was right, or if there is such a thing as right or wrong, whether he deserved to die, if God was watching over him and me, and if he let me live on, to think of him somehow, to keep him alive that way. Why at past we came to work together, and if I had been the first to die, is there anything he would have to remember me by? This is a kind of longish poem. There's a couple references just to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. You all may remember Idi Amin from was it the 70s? He was that weird guy in Africa who butchered his people and ate them and killed several million. And then Eugenio Pacelli was Pope Pius XII. Zane Grey, in case you've never read cowboy novels, was a really famous cowboy novelist. Wrote a zillion books. This poem is entitled, "I Could Be Sentenced to Eternal Fire." I skipped church today because Debbie had to go to the office to catch up. So I stayed home and took a day for me, my personal God I'd tell no one about. For that could be turning away, maybe, or something else I could be sentenced to eternal fire for doing or not doing, as the case may be. I think if I get through without buying a gun and going out and whacking some teenage kid, I should be pretty okay. But in the church I grew up in and still go to, I can still be in trouble for an impure thought, let alone sodomizing a little boy, so hell must be filled up with Catholic priests. So I'm thinking there won't be any room left anyhow, unless I really go off the deep end. I figure I'm probably going to be okay, eternity-wise, even though you can go to hell, or you used to be able to anyway, for missing Mass, which surely shouldn't be treated as harshly as, say, Hitler's or Idi Amin's faults and sins might be, or even Eugenio Pacelli's, who current scholarship shows collaborated with Old Dolph, and they still made him into a saint, so go figure. I guess on the great balance scale in that big farmer's market in the sky, I'm probably a pretty small potato when it comes to sin, and the more I think about it, the more I think it really could all just be a trick. This stuff about Jesus, I mean, they're finding out more and more about less and less. Like all of the words in the Bible, out of all of the words in the Bible, there's only 3 of them that can be directly attributed to him. And all the rest were made up by people hundreds of years later, like Zane Grey writing about Wyatt Earp and Jesse James. Though it has to be said, there are considerably better records of those guys than of Jesus. An editor sent me a note today and wanted me to write a bio about why I write poems. So I wrote a bio that said, I really don't know what a poem is or what it does. And maybe that's the best we can do about religion, too. Consider that staying home today, trying to convert the wading pool we bought for our grandson that sprang a leak and only has 1 ring, into being a big bird bath. That's the thing. Figure out what the robins need. Make it less threatening. Watch them out the window for the couple hours I might have spent praying. See how the robins needed something to make the water shallower, to get in and splash around, to place some old bricks into the pool. Note how a bird can stand motionless for what seems an eternity as they wait for the movement of the worm water spilling from the pool brings. How am I doing on time, Rex? 1 minute? 1 more? Okay.
1 minute poem.
Well, this is a 4-minute long poem. So, last week I was out mowing the lawn. This poem segues directly into the poem from the title, so I'll read it over again. Last week I was out mowing the lawn, and in the area between the street and the sidewalk, what some people call the parking, I found a silver pen. It's a cheap plastic pen that some company gives away, that some kid, I'm guessing, dropped on her way to summer school. It may have had snot rubbed all over it, for all I know. Or maybe it belonged to some old guy who was walking to the grocery store 10 blocks away because he doesn't have a car. And he stuck it in his ear to get the wax out, like you see people do sometimes, who do things so much that they're really gross like that and they become unconscious habits. Or maybe it belonged to the assessor who comes around every once in a while to shoot a picture of my weedy, overgrown, tree-shrouded and shrubby plant and vine house that looks like Boo Radley's, and snaps a picture for the county website to display along with the assessed value and the square footage and who the owner is. Me, haha, it's the bank. Until I finally get it paid off, then it's the devil's. So that anyone, even your most innocent reader of this poem, for instance, could go to the county assessor's website and read that, except for the part about the bank and the devil. Plus, you can't see the part where it tells where my soul is hung up in there somehow, dripping from the rafters like ectoplasm. Or it could have been the FedEx guy or the UPS guy or the mailman. I've seen them all and they are guys, so I'm not being sexist here. It is silver made out of plastic, one of those throwaways they give out at conferences that are the only good reason for going to conferences that I can tell, except maybe for the sticky notes you sometimes get. And it's a little fat too, fatter than I like to hold in my hand to write. Yes, I actually write all this drivel out by what back in the last century was called longhand, though mine actually resembles more or less a schematic diagram of what a rolled up bale of barbed wire looks like when I put all these words together on a page than anything else. I know because I have worked on farms, I've worked on ranches, and I have picked up 70-pound bales of barbed wire and unreeled them and stapled the wires onto fence posts. I picked up this pen and stuck it in my pocket while I mowed. I had to stoop down to get out of the grass, and I wrote on the palm of my hand, on my left, because I write with my right, I wrote some word I can't remember now. I'm not even sure it was a word. It may have been a star or a moon or a wiggly line to represent a worm. I may have written love or in perpetuity or ignorance or death. I can't remember now. Even if I were waterboarded by our government's finest, I couldn't tell you. But I'm a coward. I can tell you that I would say I wrote some Arabic word or something, and I would cry because I'm a poet. I'm a sissy. I can't take pain. But to tell you the truth, it could have only been a line, a wavy line or a dash, signifying nothing but that the pen writes. It is an instrument, and I had picked it up, more or less spared it, I guess, from inutility. It could have lost all its value and purpose of being, a tragic thing to have happened to anyone on earth or anything, to have your meaning taken away from you. So I stuffed it in my pocket. Days later, I find it again, take it out and wash it off with soap and water in the sink, where I shave in the mornings when I go to work, and I tried it again. It writes very well. It invented these words as it moved across the paper. It has a word on the side of it in bold, Renaissance, and another word, smaller, hotels. So it had lived a better life at one time. I saved it like baby Moses, so it could let its smooth ink write out these words, black as the night that has made them, pure as they are black, words against this grid of blue lines, through which you can peek like a voyeur through a Venetian blind, into the white, into the void. Thank you.
Let's have another hand for Greg Kosmicki. I'm always very heartened when I hear Greg's poems. He says, I just write about whatever I happen to come up with. And I said, well, you know, it's a stream of consciousness, kind of like, well, there's a guy, Jerry Stern. I don't know if you've ever heard him. He taught for some time over at the University of Iowa and came to Lincoln a couple of times to read at Andrews Hall. And I always get that same feeling when I listen to Greg. You and Jerry must be long-lost buddies from somewhere, I'm not sure. But they've got the same kind of general tone, if you want to call it a tone. Tone sound good? Okay. They have this same kind of general magic that just kind of overtakes me, and I really enjoy it. Thank you for being here tonight.